The Crimson Fury sliced through the shattered remnants of Earth's atmosphere, its hull scorched by the heat of re-entry. The once vibrant planet, now a husk of what it had been, sprawled beneath them, desolate, empty, its cities reduced to rubble. On board, the crew of the last human warship was preparing for their impossible mission, to strike back at the HFY, the alien empire that had decimated their species. Captain Alana Reyes stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the hollow expanse of Earth's surface on the main screen. Her gaze, steely and unwavering, was fixed on the scared planet below. She had seen Earth burn, seen the last of its once mighty fleets fall beneath the might of the HFY, but she couldn't bring herself to look away. Earth was her home, and it had been reduced to a memory, but it wasn't gone. Not yet. "Captain, we're within range of the HFY patrol route," came the voice of Lieutenant Marcus Holt, her second in command. He stood by the navigation console, fingers flying across the keys as he adjusted their course. "If we push forward now, we can hit their next supply convoy." Reyes nodded, her jaw set in a grim line. She could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on her, the lives of her crew and the remnants of humanity hanging in the balance. But there was no room for hesitation. The HFY had to be stopped, and their only chance was the Crimson Fury, a warship built from the last scraps of Earth's military might. "How long until we hit the HFY patrol?" she asked, her voice cold but commanding. 15 minutes, Holt replied, his face tense as he looked at the tactical display. "We'll be on top of them before they can react, but their response time will be quick." Reyes turned to her crew, all gathered in the bridge. Every face was a reflection of the same determination, the same hunger to survive. Their mission was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and vanish before the HFY knew what hit them. It had worked once before, but this time, the stakes were higher. "Prep the weapons," Reyes barked. "Make sure every gun is locked and loaded. If we're going to do this, we do it with everything we've got." The crew scrambled to their stations, moving with practiced efficiency. The tension in the air was palpable. Reyes's mind raced, but her resolve remained unshaken. This wasn't just about the Crimson Fury or her crew. It was about the last of humanity. They couldn't afford to lose this fight. The rumble of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor as they pushed forward. Reyes stood tall, her eyes scanning the stars ahead of them. This would be no easy task. The HFY had already wiped out the majority of Earth's forces, but there was something they hadn't counted on: humanity's capacity to survive against all odds. "Captain," came the voice of Ensign Park from the weapons station, "we're locked on to the convoy. Should we engage?" Reyes hesitated only a moment, her grip tightening on the edge of the command console. There was no turning back now. "Engage," she ordered. "No mercy." The Crimson Fury's weapon systems hummed to life, and a chorus of deadly energy beams lit up the vastness of space. The first HFY ship exploded in a fiery burst, its shattered remains scattering into the void. The human warship struck with precision, destroying ship after ship in a dazzling display of firepower. But as their victory seemed within reach, the unmistakable shape of a larger HFY warship appeared in the distance. A dreadnought. "Shit," Holt muttered, eyes wide. "It's a trap." Reyes's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. This wasn't the first time they'd faced overwhelming odds, and it wouldn't be the last. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not done yet." The battle was far from over. The Crimson Fury had torn through the HFY convoy with brutal efficiency, but the sudden appearance of the dreadnought threw everything into chaos. Its massive guns swiveled toward them, glowing with ominous energy, and the crew braced for impact. "Captain, they've launched interceptors," Lieutenant Holt shouted, eyes darting to the tactical display. The HFY ships, sleek and deadly, swarmed like a horde of insects. Each one was a lethal threat capable of bringing down the Crimson Fury with a single strike. The crew could feel the pressure building. But Reyes's focus never wavered. "Evasive maneuvers, now," she commanded, her voice steady. The Crimson Fury rocked as the ship twisted, narrowly dodging a volley of plasma fire from one of the interceptors. The hull shuddered, sparks flying from the overhead conduits. But they held course. "Helm 30 degrees to port. Engage afterburners," Rise ordered, her eyes locked on the viewports ahead. The dreadnought loomed large in the distance, its weapons ready to vaporize them with a single shot. "We're too close to outrun them, Captain," Holt warned. "They'll track us with their disruptors." Rise glanced at the status reports flashing across the bridge. Shield integrity holding at 70%, hull breaches on decks 3 and 5, but nothing catastrophic. Yet. "Prepared to make a jump," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We'll hit them before they can adjust their targeting systems. Tactical, target their engine core. Let's see if we can slow them down." Park, at the weapons station, didn't hesitate. "Aye, Captain." Locking on. The crew's breath held as the Crimson Fury surged forward, dodging Xalfar fire with a series of expert twists and turns. Rise could feel the sweat beading on her brow, the ship's constant rocking, and the hum of the emergency alarms surrounding her. The dreadnought's fire was relentless, but the Crimson Fury was faster, more nimble. "Target locked," Park announced. "Fire." Rise snapped. The ship's weapon systems responded in a flash, energy cannons and torpedoes unleashed in perfect synchronization. The first salvo struck the dreadnought's forward shields, but the ship's massive size absorbed most of the impact. A second volley, more concentrated, hit its engine core. The result was immediate. A violent explosion rocked the enemy ship, sending shockwaves through the void. But the Xalfar were not so easily defeated. A secondary wave of interceptors surged forward, swarming the Crimson Fury with deadly precision. Rise could feel her pulse pounding as their proximity alarms blared. They were being surrounded. It was only a matter of time before the overwhelming numbers of the Xalfar fleet crushed them. "Status report," she demanded, her eyes scanning the rapidly shifting displays. "Shields at 40% and dropping," Holt said, his voice tight. "We're not going to last much longer in this engagement." Rise gritted her teeth, forcing her mind to stay focused. A part of her wanted to retreat, to escape and live to fight another day. But they couldn't. Not anymore. The Crimson Fury was humanity's last hope, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. "Divert power to the forward plasma cannons," she ordered. "We're taking them out. Now." "We've got a problem, Captain," Park said, her voice strained. "The forward plasma banks are offline after that last hit. We need at least 30 minutes to get them back online." "Do we have 30 minutes?" Rise shot back. "I don't think we do." Her mind raced, calculating their options. There was only one choice left. If they couldn't outrun the Xalfar or overpower them with force, then they would have to outsmart them. Rise turned to Holt, who had already begun to read her mind. "Helm, initiate jump sequence." "Now," she ordered. Holt's hands flew across the console. "Aye, Captain." "But the navigation charts for the sector are sparse at best. I can't guarantee we won't end up in the middle of an asteroid field or worse." "No choice," Rise said, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. "Do it." The Crimson Fury lurched as the jump drive engaged. For a moment, the universe seemed to stretch and contract, a blur of stars and light. Then the ship slammed into real space again, the screech of metal on metal filling the bridge. A brief silence. Then Reyes's eyes widened as the view screen flickered. They were no longer within the Xalfar's immediate range, but they had jumped into something far worse. "Captain," Holt said, voice barely above a whisper, "we've just jumped into the edge of the Xalfar home system." Rise felt the weight of those words crash down on her. They were deep in enemy territory now, surrounded by unknown dangers. The Crimson Fury was limping, but it was alive, and they had just made the boldest move humanity could. It was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of whether humanity could fight back, or if they would become the next casualty in the Sci-Fi's galactic conquest. "Prepare for everything," Rice said grimly. "We're not just surviving anymore. We're going to make them regret ever setting foot in our galaxy." The Crimson Fury drifted through the cold expanse of space, its systems groaning under the strain of the damage it had taken. The jump had bought them precious time, but they were far from safe. Ahead, the Telfar home system loomed, a vast and mysterious expanse teeming with danger. Rice could feel the tension rising in the pit of her stomach as she surveyed the silent void, her mind calculating their next move. "We're deep in enemy territory now," Holt said, his voice taut with concern. "If the Xalfar didn't track our jump, they will soon enough." Rice turned her attention to the view screen, where a massive red star hung in the distance, surrounded by the ominous silhouettes of Xalfar ships. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "Maybe a few hours, maybe less," Holt answered, his fingers flying across the console as he analyzed their situation. "We can't outrun them, and we're too damaged to fight head-on. If we stay here, they'll find us." Rice clenched her fists. She'd never been one to run, not when there was a chance to strike back. But they needed more than a miracle now. They needed allies. "Captain, we've detected something on the scanners," Ensign Park called from her station. Her voice held a note of caution. "There's a small, uncharted planet nearby. It doesn't appear on any of our charts. We should investigate." Rice frowned. A hidden planet in the heart of Xalfar space. It could be a trap, or it could be the break they needed. "Can we make it there without being detected?" she asked. "Not with any certainty," Park replied. "But it's a long shot. It's either that or wait to be found." Reyes's mind raced. The Crimson Fury's fuel reserves were low, and their stealth systems were barely functional after the previous battles. But the planet was their only option. They couldn't fight the entire Xalfar fleet. Not yet. If they could find refuge there, perhaps they could regroup and make their next move. "Set a course for the planet," Rice said, her voice steady. "Keep it quiet. We don't want to attract attention." As the ship adjusted its trajectory, Rice moved to the command center window, gazing out into the vast emptiness of space. The silence was oppressive, like the calm before a storm. She didn't know what they would find on the planet, but she had no choice but to trust her instincts. Hours passed in tense silence, the ship moving through the dark void with painstaking care. The crew worked in a rhythm, silently performing their duties, knowing that any misstep could be their last. Rice could feel the weight of their uncertainty pressing down on her, but she refused to let it show. Finally, the planet came into view, a rocky, barren world with a thin atmosphere, barely able to sustain life. From a distance, it seemed lifeless, nothing more than a dead rock circling a dying star. But as they approached, something strange caught Reyes's eye. A structure, faintly visible on the surface. A sign of life. "Prepare to land," Reyes ordered. "We're going down." As the Crimson Fury descended into the planet's atmosphere, the ship's systems groaned under the strain. The turbulence was intense, but they had no choice but to push forward. Sweat beaded on Reyes's forehead as she watched the landscape unfold before them. A barren wasteland dotted with ruins and strange, unnatural formations. The planet's surface was scared, as if some great disaster had left it in a perpetual state of decay. "Where do we land?" Holt asked, his voice tight. "Anywhere secure," Rice replied, her eyes scanning the surface. "We'll have to move quickly once we're on the ground. Let's hope we're not the only ones here." The ship touched down with a heavy thud, its landing gear scraping against the rocky terrain. The crew hurriedly began their preparations, donning their combat suits and grabbing weapons. Rice remained calm, her mind focused on the task at hand. They needed to figure out what this planet was, and who, if anyone, was hiding here. "Stay sharp," she ordered, her voice low but commanding. We don't know who or what we're dealing with. The air outside was thin and cold, the ground covered in jagged rocks and strange, twisted plant life. The planet's atmosphere was toxic to most forms of life, but there was something about it that felt off. As they moved out of the Crimson Fury's landing bay and into the alien wilderness, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. A faint hum filled the air, a low, almost imperceptible sound, like a distant engine or machinery. It wasn't natural, and it certainly wasn't of human origin. Captain, Park said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's something down there. I don't know what it is, but we're not alone. Reyes's instincts flared. They had come to the edge of Zalfar space, a place where few ventured, and fewer still returned from. Whatever awaited them on this strange, hidden world could be their salvation or their doom. Move out, Reyes commanded, and stay together. We don't know what's waiting for us. As they ventured deeper into the planet's desolate landscape, the humming grew louder, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to reverberate through the ground itself. They were getting closer, and with every step, Reyes couldn't help but wonder, what had this planet once been? And what had become of those who had lived here before? The answers, she knew, were waiting. The crew moved cautiously through the barren landscape, their boots crunching on the rocky ground, each step echoing in the eerie silence. The air was thin, tinged with the smell of metal and decay, and the hum they had heard earlier was growing louder with each passing minute. It seemed to be coming from somewhere deep within the planet, as if the planet itself were alive and watching them. Captain Reyes led the way, her instincts sharp, eyes darting around as they passed through the twisted, otherworldly vegetation. There was something ancient about this place, something far older than the Zalfar or even humanity. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of history pressing down on them. What do you think this place was? Lieutenant Holt asked in a hushed tone, his voice barely audible over the hum. His eyes scanned the strange alien structures that loomed ahead, half buried in the rocky terrain. They looked like ruins, but something about their design was off, too orderly, too precise. I don't know, Reyes muttered, her thoughts clouded by the growing sense of unease. But we're about to find out. The group approached the source of the hum, a series of massive, jagged rock formations that seemed to form a natural entrance to an underground complex. As they neared, the hum became a low, vibrating pulse that resonated through the ground, almost as if the entire planet were alive with energy. Reyes's hand tightened on the hilt of her sidearm, ready for whatever awaited them within. Stay sharp, she ordered, voice steady. We don't know what's down there, and we don't know if it's friend or foe. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for the crew to pass through single file. As they descended into the cavern, the temperature dropped sharply, and the hum intensified, vibrating through the walls. The flickering glow of their torches revealed strange symbols etched into the stone, a language unlike anything Reyes had ever seen. It wasn't Zalfar, nor was it anything human. It was alien in the truest sense of the word. Captain, look at this, Ensign Park said, kneeling beside one of the symbols. Her flashlight illuminated a panel embedded in the wall, covered in the same strange markings. Reyes approached, crouching down to examine the panel. The markings seemed to pulse with a faint blue glow, as though the stone itself were alive, reacting to their presence. Can you make anything out? Reyes asked, her voice low. Park shook her head. I don't think it's anything I can decipher with our current tools, but this isn't just a ruin. It's a facility, some kind of base. Look at the layout. These symbols, they're not just random. They're coordinates, systems, maybe even instructions. Suddenly, the hum that had been filling the air stopped. A moment of tense silence passed, followed by a soft click. The stone wall ahead shifted, slowly sliding open to reveal a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with more strange symbols and intricate machinery. A cold wind blew through the chamber as the team moved forward, their torches casting eerie shadows against the smooth metallic surfaces. The room was vast, its ceiling stretching high above them, disappearing into darkness. At the center of the chamber stood an enormous crystalline structure, its facets glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "What is this place?" Holt asked, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Rise replied, her voice tight with uncertainty. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." As they approached the crystalline structure, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the faint humming sound returned, now louder and more intense than ever. The crystal seemed to pulse in time with the vibrations, its glow intensifying as they drew closer. "Captain," Park said, a hint of fear in her voice. "This isn't just a power source. It's alive. I can feel it." Wright hesitated. The Crimson Fury had encountered strange artifacts before, but this was different. This wasn't just a relic. This was something far more powerful, something far older. Suddenly, the crystal pulsed again, and the chamber's walls shifted, revealing a series of massive holographic images. The projections flickered to life, displaying scenes of a civilization long gone. Alien ships, sleek and advanced, streaked across the stars. Planets burned, civilizations rose and fell. And then, a terrifying image appeared. A massive fleet of Zalfar ships, warships that blotted out the stars, destroying everything in their path. Race's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary ruin. The Zalfar had not simply conquered planets, they had wiped out entire civilizations, obliterating everything in their wake. But there was more. The final image in the hologram was a face, an alien face, humanoid but not quite. The eyes were wide, glowing with an eerie intensity. It was an expression of warning, of fear, as though the being had known the destruction that was coming. "Who were they?" Holt whispered, his voice hushed in reverence. Rice took a step forward, her eyes locked on the image of the alien. The hologram flickered again, this time showing something else. An inscription, carved in the same strange symbols that covered the walls. Park moved forward, studying it closely. "It says, 'The end of the Zalfar is written here. They will fall, but not before they destroy all.'" The words sent a chill down Reyes's spine. This alien race had known the Zalfar were coming. They had tried to warn the galaxy, but they had failed. And now, it seemed, their legacy, whatever it was, had found its way into humanity's hands. "Are we too late?" Holt asked, a grim question hanging in the air. Reyes stared at the holographic face, now frozen in a look of terror. The answer was clear. The Zalfar were more than just conquerors. They were a force of destruction unlike anything humanity had ever faced. And whatever legacy was hidden in this ruin could be humanity's last hope, or their final curse. Rice stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the flickering holograms that still hovered in the dimly lit chamber. The cryptic alien message echoed in her mind. "The end of the Zalfar is written here. They will fall, but not before they destroy all." It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. The Zalfar Empire, a galaxy-spanning force of destruction, had come across something they could not destroy. But in their wake, they had left a trail of broken civilizations, one of which had seen the future, and humanity had stumbled upon the key to that future. Park was the first to break the silence, her voice trembling with awe. "This isn't just a message, Captain. It's a prophecy." Reyes's gaze never wavered from the holograms, but her mind raced. The alien race that had created this place had known about the Zalfar. They had known their power, their cruelty. And yet they had left behind a final message, hidden away in this ancient ruin, forgotten until now. Holt shifted beside her, glancing nervously at the towering crystal that stood at the center of the chamber. "Do you think it's true that we're the ones who are supposed to stop the Zalfar?" Rice exhaled sharply, her thoughts a whirlwind. The idea was staggering. Humanity, barely surviving after the Zalfar's invasion, was now supposed to be the galaxy's last hope. But this ruin, these images, suggested something greater, something far beyond just survival. This wasn't just about repelling an invasion. This was about ending a cycle of destruction that had spanned countless generations. "We'll never know unless we try," Rice finally replied, her voice steady. "But whatever is here, whatever this legacy is, we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. If the Xalthar were this determined to wipe it out, then there's something more to this place than we realize." Park stepped closer to the crystal, examining it carefully. "There's a console here," she said, pointing to a series of intricate panels embedded in the floor surrounding the crystal. "It looks like the same symbols we saw earlier. Maybe it's the key to activating whatever this place is meant to do." Reyes moved toward the console, a sense of urgency creeping into her every movement. The Crimson Fury's time in the system was running out. The Xalthar would be searching for them soon, and they needed to understand whatever weapon or knowledge this ruin contained before they were discovered. She glanced back at Holt. "Get the rest of the crew ready to move. If this place holds what I think it does, we may need to leave in a hurry." Holt nodded and turned to give the order, his voice carrying across the chamber. Rice turned back to Park, who was now carefully entering commands on the glowing console. The symbols on the panel seemed to shift and rearrange under Park's fingertips, responding to her touch as if they were alive. The room vibrated slightly, a low rumble deep in the ground. "I think I'm in," Park said, her voice filled with excitement and caution. "It's unlocking something, some kind of data stream." The holograms flickered and shifted once more, this time displaying a 3D star map, ancient and incomplete. There were coordinates, hundreds of them, scattered across the galaxy, each one marked with symbols that resembled the same alien writing. Some were clustered near the Xalthar home system, others on distant, uncharted worlds. "This is a map," Rice said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's showing locations, places where the Xalthar have destroyed entire civilizations. But there's something else. Look." As Park zoomed in on one of the coordinates, a new set of symbols appeared. They weren't Xalthar. They were human. Not just human, but marked in a way that was eerily familiar. Ships, technology, blueprints. A weapon. Reyes's heart skipped a beat. This is it. This is the weapon. The realization hit her like a hammer blow. The legacy of this ancient civilization was more than just a prophecy. It was a plan, an ancient blueprint for a weapon capable of ending the Xalthar once and for all. And it was hidden across the galaxy, spread out in pieces. "We need to find these locations," Rice said, her voice firm with resolve. "We need to gather everything they left behind. This is humanity's chance to strike back." Park's fingers flew over the console, pulling up a list of planets, some familiar, some unknown. But before Rice could process all the information, the rumble beneath their feet intensified, and a shrill alarm sounded from the ship's comms. "Captain, we've got incoming ships." Holt's voice crackled through the comm. "Xalthar fleet, dozens of ships. They found us." Reyes's eyes narrowed. They were out of time. "Park, seal that data. Copy everything to the ship's systems. We're leaving now." "We can't take the Crimson Fury back up through the atmosphere without drawing their attention," Park said, her voice tight. "We'll have to find another way." "Then we make our own path," Reyes said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll use the ruins. If the Xalthar are here, they're not leaving without a fight. But we're not either." Reyes glanced at the alien map one last time, her mind already calculating their next move. The Xalthar thought they had won. They thought humanity was already beaten, but they had no idea what was coming. "Let's move," she commanded, her voice a promise. "Humanity is about to strike back." The ground quaked as the Crimson Fury's proximity alarms blared in unison with the shrill wails of the alien ruins. Captain Rice gripped her weapon tightly, her knuckles white, as she barked orders into her comm. "Holt, prepare the crew for combat." Park, secure the data now. We don't leave this place empty-handed. Park's fingers danced across the alien console, transferring the glowing data streams to the ship's memory core. Almost done, Captain. Just a few more seconds, she shouted, her voice competing with the growing cacophony. Ray stepped back toward the entrance of the chamber, her sharp gaze fixed on the cavernous opening where the team had entered. The hum in the air had transformed into a deep, pulsating vibration, as though the ruins themselves were waking up. She knew what it meant. The Telfar were closing in. From her vantage point, Ray spotted the first wave of enemy drones spilling into the cavern. The Uxalfar machines were spindly constructs, their bodies sleek and insectoid, with glowing red eyes that pulsed with malice. They moved with unnatural fluidity, their movements precise and deliberate as they scanned the area. Contact! Reyes yelled, raising her rifle and firing the first shot. The energy bolt streaked through the air, striking the drone dead center and sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. The cavern erupted into chaos as the rest of the crew sprang into action. Holt and a squad of soldiers formed a defensive line near the entrance, unloading pulse rifles into the advancing enemy. Energy blasts lit up the chamber in rapid flashes, casting eerie shadows across the alien walls. Park, how much longer? Rice shouted, firing another shot as a second wave of drones emerged from the darkness. Just about done. Park's voice cracked with relief as the console emitted a sharp chime. Data's secured. I've locked the ruins systems to slow them down. Good. Now fall back to the ship. The crew began their retreat, moving in disciplined formations as the Uxalfar drones pressed their attack. Holt's team laid down suppressing fire while Park and the tech crew carried the data modules toward the waiting Crimson Fury. But the Uxalfar weren't just sending drones. Rise's gut twisted as she spotted a hulking silhouette stepping into the cavern. A Uxalfar battle construct, a massive quadrupedal machine bristling with weapons and armor. Its glowing red core pulsed menacingly as it advanced, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Captain, that thing's got enough firepower to level this entire cavern, Holt called out, his voice strained. Then we don't let it fire. Rice snapped. Focus everything on that core. Take it down before it gets a shot off. The crew unleashed a coordinated assault, their weapons lighting up the cavern as they targeted the battle construct. Rice took point, her aim steady as she fired precise shots at the core. But the construct's armor was thick, and it shrugged off the attacks with ease. The ruins seemed to sense the chaos, their walls glowing brighter as the vibrations intensified. Suddenly, a series of alien glyphs on the walls began to shift, projecting beams of energy toward the Uxalfar forces. The drones faltered, some collapsing under the alien energy blasts, while others adapted, redirecting their focus toward the source of the interference. Reyes's eyes widened. The ruins, they're defending themselves. It's not enough. Holt shouted as the battle construct opened fire, its energy cannons blasting craters into the ground and sending debris flying. Reyes made a split-second decision. Holt, keep firing. I'm going for the core. Captain, you can't. Stay in position. That's an order. Reyes broke from cover, sprinting across the battlefield as the construct's cannon swiveled toward her. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step a gamble with death. The vibrations underfoot were growing stronger, almost destabilizing, but she ignored them, her focus unyielding. She slid behind a jagged rock formation as the construct's cannon fired, missing her by inches. Reyes grabbed a plasma charge from her belt, priming it as she moved into position. The construct's core was exposed for only a moment between its movements, a narrow window, but one she couldn't afford to miss. Now or never, she muttered, throwing the charge with all her strength. The device sailed through the air, landing squarely in the center of the construct's glowing core. Reyes dove for cover as the charge detonated, sending a blinding shockwave through the chamber. The construct let out a deafening screech, its core imploding in a burst of crimson light. As the dust settled, Rice pushed herself to her feet, coughing from the debris. The battle construct lay in ruins, its smoldering remains scattered across the cavern floor. The remaining drones faltered, their movements erratic as the alien ruins continued their assault. "Captain, we got to go," Holt called out, gesturing toward the exit. Rice nodded, rallying the crew. "Fall back to the ship. Now." The team raced toward the Crimson Fury, the vibrations beneath them escalating to a near unbearable intensity. Rice cast one last glance at the ruins as they boarded the ship. The alien structure seemed alive, its energy flaring brightly, as if it were sending them off with one final message. "You've only begun the fight." The Crimson Fury roared to life, its engines igniting as it ascended into the atmosphere. Behind them, the ruins collapsed in on themselves, burying their secrets and their warnings beneath the planet's surface. Rice stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The HFY knew they were here now. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The Crimson Fury tore through the planet's atmosphere, its engines screaming as Rice pushed them to their limits. On the bridge, the crew worked with precision, relaying damage reports and coordinating defensive maneuvers. The HFY fleet hung in orbit like a swarm of locusts, their angular warships bristling with weaponry. "We're in their crosshairs," Lieutenant Holt said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Enemy ships are locking weapons." "Helm, evasive pattern Theta-4," Rice ordered, gripping the console as the ship rocked from another near miss. "We need to break through their formation and jump to FTL." "They've deployed interceptors," Ensign Park called out from the tactical station. 15. No, 20 squadrons inbound. The ship shuddered again as the interceptors opened fire, streaks of crimson energy battering the Crimson Fury's shields. On screen, the enemy fighters moved with mechanical precision, weaving through space like a deadly ballet. "Shields holding at 60%, reported Chief Engineer Vasquez. "But we can't take much more of this." Reyes's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the Sci-Fi fleet, not with so many fighters closing in. They needed a distraction, something to buy them the time they desperately needed. "Park, status on the ruins energy signature," she said sharply. Park glanced at her console, then back at Reyes. "Still detectable, Captain. The core destabilization is causing massive energy spikes across the region." An idea sparked in Reyes's mind. It was risky, reckless, even, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "What's the yield on that destabilization? Could we trigger it remotely?" Park's eyes widened as she caught on to Reyes's plan. "We could, but it'd be like lighting a star. The resulting explosion would take out half the HFY fleet in orbit. And us if we're too close," Holt added grimly. Rice locked eyes with him. "We won't be, but it's the only way to punch a hole in their lines. Get me targeting coordinates for a remote detonation." Holt hesitated, then nodded, his fingers flying across the console. Coordinates locked in. Transmitting to tactical systems now. "Vasquez, reroute power to shields and engines," Rice continued. "We're going to need every ounce of speed to outrun that blast." "Aye, Captain," Vasquez said, sweat beading on his forehead as he initiated the power transfer. The Crimson Fury swung around, racing back toward the planet's surface. The HFY interceptors pursued relentlessly, their energy blasts peppering the ship's shields. "Target locked," Park announced, awaiting your command. "Fire," Rice ordered. A single missile streaked away from the Crimson Fury, diving toward the planet below. The crew watched in tense silence as it disappeared into the swirling chaos of the ruins' energy field. Moments later, the planet's surface erupted in a blinding explosion. The ruins detonated in a cascade of energy, a massive shockwave rippling outward and consuming the HFY ships caught in its path. "Direct hit," Park shouted, a note of triumph in her voice. Rice didn't smile. "Helm, get us out of here." Engage FTL. The Crimson Fury surged forward, its engines roaring as it raced away from the growing inferno. Behind them, the Uxal-Far fleet dissolved into chaos, their ships caught in the maelstrom of destruction. Jumping to FTL in 3, 2, 1, the helmsman announced. The stars stretched into streaks of light as the ship leaped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the battlefield and the ruins behind. Reyes exhaled, her hands trembling as she released her grip on the console. Status: damage is manageable. Vask has reported. Shields at 30%, but we're holding together. We've got the data, Park added, her voice tinged with exhaustion. It's all here. The coordinates, the weapon specs, everything. Reyes nodded, her gaze fixed on the streaking stars outside the viewport. Good, because this was just the beginning. The Uxal-Far know we're a threat now. They'll come for us with everything they've got. Holt leaned against his console, his expression grim. And what do we do when they do? Reyes' eyes burned with determination. We hit them first. We find those coordinates, we build that weapon, and we make sure they never threaten anyone again. The bridge fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the crew. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, they had more than just survival. They had hope. The Crimson Fury emerged from FTL into a sector of space that seemed unremarkable at first glance, a dim star surrounded by a field of shattered asteroids. But this was no ordinary debris field. These rocks were remnants of a forgotten war, an ancient battlefield littered with fragments of advanced technology and long-dead vessels. Coordinates match, Park said, her voice steady but tinged with awe. This is the first location from the ruins data. Scanning now. Reyes leaned forward in her captain's chair, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. What do we know about this place? Preliminary scans show significant energy readings buried in the largest asteroid, Vask's replied. Looks like some kind of power source, ancient, but still active. Reyes nodded. Park, get us a closer look. If this is what the ruins hinted at, we need to secure it before the Uxal-Far catch up. The Crimson Fury moved cautiously into the field, its hull brushing past fragments of alien wreckage. As they approached the massive asteroid at the center, a structure came into view, a colossal metallic fortress embedded within the rock. Its surface was covered in alien glyphs similar to those in the ruins, glowing faintly as if responding to their presence. Unbelievable, Holt muttered. This thing's been sitting here for centuries, maybe millennia. But what's inside? Reyes said. Park, do we have access to the ruins' key systems? Anything we can use to unlock this place? Park worked quickly, interfacing with the ship's systems. I've got a match, she said. The glyphs are reacting to the data we recovered, sending a signal now. A pulse of light rippled across the fortress, and the massive doors began to grind open, revealing a cavernous interior. Inside, an array of alien machinery hummed with latent energy, and at its center, a massive crystalline core pulsed with light. Captain, Vask said, his voice low, that core, it's a weapon system, a big one. If we can figure out how to activate it. We're not leaving without it, Reyes said, rising to her feet. Holt, assemble a team. We're going in. The boarding party descended into the fortress, their boots echoing against the ancient metal floors. Reyes led the way, her rifle at the ready. The air inside was heavy with the weight of ages, the faint hum of the machinery the only sound. This tech is incredible, Park said, scanning the walls as they moved deeper. It's like the ruins, but more advanced, almost as if this was their final stronghold. Whatever it is, we need to move fast, Reyes said. The Uxal-Far won't be far behind. Her words proved prophetic. The comms crackled with urgency as the bridge reported incoming hostiles. Captain, Uxal-Far ships just dropped out of FTL. The helmsman's voice called out. They've found us. Reyes' jaw tightened. Holt, hold position here and secure the core. Park, can you rig this thing for activation? I can try, Park replied, already interfacing with the alien systems. But I'll need time. You've got 10 minutes, Ray said. Make it count. Back on the bridge, the Crimson Fury's crew was already engaging the enemy. Energy bolts streaked through space as the human ship dodged and weaved, its weapons firing in controlled bursts. But the Xalfar weren't holding back. Their larger ships moved into formation, surrounding the asteroid and cutting off escape routes. We're outgunned, Vask said grimly, watching the tactical display. Not yet, Rice countered. She opened a channel to Park. Status. I'm close, Park said, sweat beading on her brow as she manipulated the alien controls. Just a few more adjustments. A sudden thunderous vibration rocked the fortress as the Xalfar began firing directly on the asteroid. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and Holt's team scrambled to protect the core. Park, we're out of time, Ryde shouted. I've got it, Park exclaimed. The crystalline core flared to life, its light filling the chamber as ancient systems reactivated. Outside, the fortress itself began to transform. Panels shifted, and massive weapon arrays extended from the asteroid's surface, glowing with deadly energy. Captain, the fortress is online, Park called out. It's targeting the Xalfar. The first beam fired, a colossal lance of energy that pierced through the nearest Xalfar ship, splitting it in two. The shockwave sent debris spiraling into their own formation, sowing chaos among their ranks. Cheers erupted on the Crimson Fury's bridge as the fortress continued its assault, obliterating ship after ship. Ryaz's voice cut through the celebration, calm and commanding. Park, set the core to self-destruct once the Xalfar are wiped out. We can't let this fall into enemy hands. Park hesitated but nodded. Understood. The Crimson Fury disengaged, pulling back as the fortress unleashed its final fury. The Xalfar fleet, once an overwhelming force, was reduced to burning wreckage. As the human ship jumped back to FTL, the fortress detonated in a blinding explosion, taking the remaining enemies with it. On the bridge, Rice stared at the display, her face unreadable. One down, she said softly. Many more to go. The crew exchanged weary but determined looks. Humanity had struck a blow against the Xalfar, but the war was far from over. The fight for survival had become a fight for victory, and for the first time, they could see the path ahead.